All right, Village. So today we'll be talking about Sound of Freedom. Basically, this is the summer box office sleeper that many people, especially Christian conservatives, are praising as, the media doesn't want you to see this type of movie. This is something that the Democrats don't want you to show you, this, that, and third. And really, there's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of mystique that goes about this movie and the facts of, its actual true story is based off of that we need to debunk. Yeah, and we need to debunk it now. And just to really preface this, we are going to be talking about trafficking, especially child trafficking, and a lot of other different situations, especially triple X situations. So if this is something that you don't want to hear, or this video, might not be for you, I don't mind you skipping and all that. But I feel like this is an important topic to talk about because when we're talking about a sensitive subject as this one, we need to make sure all the facts and figures are there. So to really just give a quick synopsis of the movie, basically is about the story of Tim Ballard, basically a former federal agent who worked in child exploitation and really worked in many years trying to take down, creepers, files and all that, in order to keep children safe. And it details his mission of him leaving the federal government and him starting his own agency, which is our Underground Railroad. Before I go more into the background of Tim Ballard and the organization, I really want to just debunk and just talk about the issue of human trafficking. So human trafficking has been around since, I would say almost the beginning of time or beginning of human, conflict. It is kind of like this umbrella term, but human trafficking and some of its other known synonyms such as trafficking in persons, as well as the modern day slavery. It always refers to a crime whereby traffickers exploit and profit at the expense of adults or children by compelling them to perform labor or engage in other different acts. There's also a common myth that it really happens in mostly children, but in actuality, human trafficking can be of any age, race, ethnicity, gender, identity, orientation, nationality. And so pretty much human trafficking happens all around the world, but within the U.S. Situation, individuals who are most vulnerable to human trafficking, at least in our populations, is children on child welfare, as well as juvenile justice systems, including foster care, runaway youth and homeless youth, unaccompanied foreign national children without lawful immigration status, individuals seeking asylum, American Indians and Alaska Natives, particularly women and girls, individual substance use, migrant workers. And while pretty much anyone can be a victim of human trafficking, not just based off the descriptors, these are just like risk factors. But unfortunately, most of these human trafficking victims are women and girls. And so that's pretty much a huge disparity that I want to acknowledge right now. Another myth I want to debunk is that most people think human trafficking only constitutes, exploitation and not really just forced labor. Most human trafficking victims actually are, forced into labor and not forced into exploitation. Adults are usually domestic workers, as well as you have industries such as construction, marketing, as well as fishing and agriculture following right behind it. And at the end of the day, about $150 billion in illegal profits are made due to, human trafficking. But the one thing to really know is that only about 4 million adults as well as 1 million children are used to be triple X exploited throughout human trafficking rings. Really understand like in which section of worlds where human trafficking prevalent. Asia and the Pacific have about 29.3 million individuals and children who are trafficked. And to really just round out the session, let's talk about our perceptions of human trafficking in America because, I feel like a lot of us here think that human traffickers are those strangers at the stores who you think is following you, like following your child, and so basically you have to flee before they put you in a white van. I'm not gonna say those situations are completely bogus because as I am friend with a lot of women, I understand that a lot of them don't feel safe in public, especially about things that even regular men do on a daily basis. But the reality of the situation is that a lot of human trafficking victims, especially children, are broomed with the G. Sometimes these kids are thrown out onto the street or exploited for simple, needs and basic needs and all that. And, they're really taking advantage of, or they meet somebody who could be a friend, family member, just a friend they met at school and all that, a rapport with them until, they can brainwash them and, trick them into getting exploited And unfortunately, a lot of these kids and adults are oftentimes pimped out in their hometowns. And so the biggest reason I'm going over this section is that The Sound of Freedom paints this old, image, Liam Neeson taking, ideology that human trafficking is just solely about kids being, shipped off by strangers and basically being exploited and being taken advantage of in a triple X manner. And basically, we need people to go in and save in and bust the bad guys and all that. When in reality, a lot of your, victims, especially here in the US, are kids who might just be working. They're unable to go to school or be able to live by themselves. So they have to go to work, especially migrant children. That has been a big issue in the US, like I said earlier. Or instead of that random man you find in a Walmart, it could be your creepy old uncle that basically, grooms you and then basically pimps you out on the street. Yeah, I know a lot of people had those type of uncles you got that weird feeling about. And so this is one of the many critiques I have about the film. But before I go into more about the film, let me talk about Tim Ballard and then OUR. So Tim Ballard earned his bachelor's degrees in Spanish and politics from BYU, as well as his master's degrees in international politics from Middlebury. And from there, Ballard has allegedly spent a year as a CIA officer in 2001. I say allegedly, we can't really confirm that. He has to confirm it, as well as CIA can't confirm it without his permission, so that's neither here or there. But also, he spent about a decade working with Homeland Security. Specifically, he works in HSI, basically Homeland Security Investigations, which is a subsection of ICE. But to continue on with the story, basically, Ballard investigated crimes under the jurisdiction of the Department of Homeland Security, such as money laundering, drug smuggling, as well as human trafficking. And this is kind of like where he got most of his experience, dealing with, adults as well as children who were victims of trafficking. And so as the years goes on, basically Ballard has become more disinterested in working with the U.S. government because of how much legally he cannot do in other countries in terms of human trafficking, which kind of makes sense because you really just can't pop up in other countries, try to disrupt some networks without any, U.S. authorization if you are a U.S. worker. The hallmark of his origin story, and something that isn't really highlighted in the movie, is that he then learns about a boy named Gardy. Gardy was a U.S. citizen, but he was a Haitian or came from Haitian descent. And while on a mission trip with his dad, basically Gardy went missing. And while he wasn't given jurisdiction to be able to do this case because it was happening in Haiti, the question sparked into him saying that, what if we start an organization and that we could bring that sort of resources and we could actually, find these kids in other countries. And that is how OUR got its founding. And so ORU, when they filed their taxes in 2013, the year of its founding and the year that Gardy went missing, basically ORU described itself as composed of primarily ex-military members. They even had a statement saying that rescue teams were comprised of highly skilled and ex-Navy SEAL, CIA, and other operatives, and that these teams work in conjunction and in sync with full cooperation with local police forces and governments to liberate children around the world. And so what this document was hinting at is ORU's modus of operations. Basically, they would go into foreign countries, pretend to be Grin Johns, basically try to buy children for, what they were trying to buy children for. And as the deal was being struck, that's when you have different police forces, military men coming in, rushing in, taking everybody off the jail and all that, and rescuing the children. And this was one of the biggest critiques that many people had about the organizations for many years, because not only are you potentially putting people at dangers by doing this type of rescue because you don't know when things can go sideways, or you're creating a new demand and forcing traffickers to try and get more kids who probably wouldn't have been trafficked in the first place, to fill that demand you're trying to bring in, than actually trying to do a productive thing. And the icky part about this is that a lot of these rescues are filmed and photographed, and oftentimes they're shown to donors here in the US to try and, get people to donate to the organization and say that, oh, we do this, we do that. And since every American has this big facade mystique of American power and American democracy need to be spread across the world, as well as like we have the best values in the nation, a lot of people aren't going to look at this and be like, oh, what are you doing? Like, you're putting these children at risk. A lot of people are going to applaud this man for doing, quote unquote, God's work, and basically they're not going to bat an eye at this, behavior. But now, since ORU has existed for about a decade, they have done thousands or at least 1,000 raids. They recovered more than 6,000 victims and put away about 4,000 and counting, predators off the street, which, if these numbers are true, because these were provided by the site, these weren't fact-based or checked by any other source, then this would be astounding. But what also makes this very startling is that we can't really fact check these numbers, because a lot of ORU, operations operate in secret. Like, they only do it in conjunction with federal agencies and other, nations, but they really haven't gotten any type of audit or investigation by any companies in the US. And a lot of times people claim it's for secrecy, it's for privacy and all that. But when people kind of hide stuff behind closed doors and say, stuff for secrecy, is pretty much for other devious purposes. But I digress. Only were many survivors saved, as well as many, predators and traffickers were taken off the street. There was a number of different movies that was taken off, from a lot of these operations, such as Operation Toussaint, the Abolitionist, which is problematic, I know, Operation Triple Take, which we will talk about pretty soon, as well as Operation Mundo Nuevo. Ballard has also gained a lot of personal success due to the efforts of, OUR. And not only has he did many books, try to do many shows, as well as, try to get money off of this, as well as leading other human trafficking initiatives through the work of OUR. But basically, he was also pointing to President Trump's public and private partnerships and committee based around human trafficking. And while there's a lot more I can talk about Ballard, his associating with the Nazarene Fund, Glenn Beck, David Burton, all that, the main meat and potatoes of this video is the actual movie, and basically I want to jump right into that. Now, as I said earlier, it's basically the origin story, or the quote-unquote true origin story of Tim Ballard, and basically his, founding of OUR, as well as the first operation of OUR. It was filmed and produced by Angel Studios, basically, who has other works such as The Chosen, Testament, as well as the co-founders of Angel Studios are Mormons just like Ballard. So you can kind of infer where I'm kind of going on with this point. Basically, in terms of how profitable they thought this movie would be, a lot of people thought this movie wouldn't be as profitable, because as the quote-unquote conservative Christians keep saying that the established media is trying to suppress this movie. They don't want to see the true impact of this movie, in which all I have to say is that human trafficking isn't a partisan issue. I feel like there's bad actors on both sides who contribute, as well as stereotype human trafficking victims, as well as doesn't really have root causes to the situations of human trafficking. But that's neither here or there. And to just give you my kind of like review and synopsis before I go into debunking this whole movie, I was very uncomfortable by the movie, because not because I didn't like the movie, nor did it really was just like, anything too crazy, but it does talk about an uncomfortable situation and an uncomfortable problem, such as, human trafficking. There were scenes in the movie where there was a lot of the gross disgusting stuff that was being implied, but I felt like I was being preached to throughout the whole movie. Like, there'll be little quips and stuff saying that God's children aren't for sale, pretty much going into those religious tones that we're doing God's work here and all this. And, while they're like heavenly people, they're people who are Christians I'm very much friends with, who are very much into their faith and all that, who don't try to preach me every other second. Like, we can still grab a drink with them and just be chill about it. I feel like this with this movie is because I feel like the gotcha is always there. It just feels like it's always in your face that we need to save these children, we need to save these children. The main plot of the movie is based around saving, this girl Rocio. Basically, her brother was, saved earlier on in the movie. And on the surface, it's very much heroic. It's very much, endearing. And like, it's very much, selfless, to the untrained eye. But I just felt like it was so much in your face. Like, we got to save this girl. Like, there was one scene basically after one of the big takedowns of the movie. In the middle of the authorities, who were there based on the movie, they were going through the children that they had just saved. And basically when he found out that it wasn't Rocio, he was just upset. And I'm just like, even if this story was remotely true, because it's not really accurate to begin with, but, even though it was remotely true, you could have been like, okay, well, we saved all these children stuff. Let's just, pack it up, go home, try again tomorrow. Like, this man looked utterly disgusted and throughout the whole, that whole sequence because that one little girl wasn't there. Like, it's so much in your face with the semantics, with the heroics, with the, just trying to be a hero, saviorship complex and all that, where it's just like, I felt like it was too much. But the real kicker of the movie was that there was this whole PSA at the end of it. Like, how movies have like facts and figures at the movies, then they just end at that with the credits. But this movie gave us facts, figures at the end, and basically it had this countdown clock while the credits were rolling, saying like important message from the actor of the movie. I think Caravizel, John Caravizel. I don't know his actual true name, but basically he was saying that this movie, needs to succeed. This is a story that needs to be told. There's many bad actors, implying the left and the Democrats didn't want this story to be told. Like, it felt like a lot of conservative, pandering being pushed to, and it was really much creating a moral panic about an issue that many people don't really know about or really didn't think about until this movie was shown. And so that was like my little first impressions review off the top of my head, about the movie, how I felt about it. But now I'm going to really go into the main issues of the movie and basically have like facts surrounding those. The first thing I want to bring up is that this movie operates in the realm of half troops and oftentimes in many gray areas. One of the key operations that this movie gets its inspiration on is Operation Triple Take. Basically, this was the fourth operation that was undertaken by OUR and Ballard, and this was done after the operations in Hades, after operations in Cartagena. And so basically the idea for Ballard and his associates to bring this island to, bring creepers as well as child victims together to, that wasn't the origin story of the foundation. That was more so the fourth mission of it that had nothing to do with Marty Gardy. The issue with this gray area is that, the entirety of this movie is spent trying to find the boys, whose name is Miguel, the boy who was rescued earlier in the movie, his sister Rocio. And while they are real people that existed in, Tim Ballard's career, they weren't really there in, any of the ORU operations. They were more so actual, victims that he recovered during his time as a, federal agent. And so this whole crusade the movie was trying to depict, saying that, he was going to like try and find Rochelle. He's, turn over a hell on earth to try and find her. She was actually recovered within 24 hours of her little brother. And so the reason, like, I have a hunch on why they try to expound upon this story so much is because it brings so much dramatic tension to the, issue. Just the same way as like why you kind of like, blur the lines between depicting, older women and children, because you're trying to create like a big moral panic on this issue, and the best way to do that is through children. And yes, I might be nitpicky. Yes, they did a little bit explaining during, with Angel Studios, they released a whole list of like different, liberties they took with the film. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about children, like actual children you claim to care about, you need to make sure the details are told with fact, and you can't conflate two different stories into one and just try to create dramatic effect, because at the end of the day, this is a real situation that harms real children. And while the true extent of like how many kids are exploited in the triple X industry is not really, you haven't been uncovered, like we only have estimates, this is something that you don't want to conflate. Another thing I want to bring up to the movie is basically its pay it forward campaign. Now, if you have not seen the movie, basically at the end during, Caravizel, whole big speech about, human trafficking being a big issue that the least don't want you to know. Basically, he in the studio basically promoted the pay it forward model, basically where you can pay for other people's tickets to be able to go see the movie and basically just spread awareness through that way. And he ties this into the whole big, we need to like make sure this problem gets known. We need awareness being out there. We need this, that, and third, which is very problematic in itself, because I feel like while people still don't know the true extent of human trafficking, I feel like most Americans are kind of aware that human trafficking and kidnapping and, stranger danger and all that is very much prevalent. The one thing that this movie could have brought more awareness to when the issues of human trafficking is that I feel like there's a bigger issue where people have that creepy uncle in the family who might be doing something strange for some change and using children for it. And a lot of people aren't checking, or a lot of people aren't really trying to, confront that. And I think that's the biggest issue that they could have done, which they had a missed opportunity. Like, they pretty much gave this, Liam Neeson taking approach to human trafficking again, that we've seen for the millionth of time in cinema and TV shows. Really just feels like an action movie rolled into like a Christian, come to Jesus meeting, and pretty much that pay it forward campaign didn't do anything good for it, because we don't really understand where the breakdown of money went, or like if that money is it being used for charity at all. Paid, yes, I get actors gonna get paid for their worth and all that, and even as inaccurate this movie is, it is probably one of the most uncomfortable movies you can probably be in. But at the end of the day, you can't be like trying to use semantics of Jesus, of loving your neighbor and all this, and paying it forward and trying to spread awareness about a moral issue, and then not try to donate the money to charity, donate the money to organizations that can actually help it, and not OUR. And just something that I feel like is a missed opportunity, or really a missed thing that they didn't really mention in the ad campaign and all that. But the one thing I really want to say that wrap up this section of video is that while this operates in the gray area, while this operates, as like a come to Jesus meeting, your semantic meeting, whatever, it really doesn't center any of the victims, like of the people who are in the movies, or the people being depicted in the movies, and basically what they went through. Like, yes, we know human trafficking is horrible, and yes, what they depict in the movie is terrible, and like, I'm pretty sure it happens in many places around the world. But when I said that it felt like more like an action movie instead of just actually like an educational campaign, that is because we pretty much center mainly just Ballard's, as well as his associates. Like, maybe there was like this one big sweet scene during the movie where the kids were beating on drums, and like one of the guys was saying like, you hear that, that's the sound of freedom, like you just freed these kids, you're amazing, dude. Even then, it's just like you're still centering the white man who came to a foreign country that has nothing to do about trying to look for little kids to rescue, while pretending to be a creeper to try and get these kids rescued. In actuality, you're driving up, the need and the market of human trafficking. Because if we're going to be frank about it, Tim Ballard's work didn't really do anything to disrupt the actual, systematic issues of why human trafficking is so prevalent around the world. Because lest you forget, I just said, human trafficking isn't just about, children being, triple X exploited. Is basically a root cause of people being in poverty, people not having housing, education, safe, legal employment, and people being taken advantage of who otherwise wouldn't be taken advantage of if they had all those resources that they needed. Tim Ballard and his operators trying to go into a country, trying to bust in doors, take names, and rescue children isn't going to solve, human trafficking. It's just a band-aid issue where they might save a few children, but literally like another human trafficking network will pop up in, its place, because human trafficking is so much more profitable in many situations, unfortunately. So with that being said, my total opinion about this whole movie is pretty much, it is not a terrible movie. I wouldn't say you should just like dismiss it or dismiss the issue, because like I said, human trafficking is a big issue. But at the end of the day, take what you see with a grain of salt, because there is too much bias, whether it be from the conservative right or just Christians and the Mormonism and all that went into this movie, to the point where it's just like it can't be taken as fact. If you actually want to learn about human trafficking and like the many different issues surrounding human trafficking, then I will definitely implore you to go to actual human trafficking organizations who are doing on the ground work, not only just in disrupting networks, but also who is performing aftercare, which is a key thing I'm going to talk about in my next video on this subject. So with that being said, if you really like this video and want to see part 2, because there's a lot more issues that I didn't get to talk about because this video was going around long, please like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that good stuff. Share this with a friend, share this video out with everybody, definitely not trying to make it a pay forward model, but definitely would appreciate support anyway. Stay warm, stay frosty, especially if you're in the South, because it is still hot as heck outside, and peace out.